Hey everyone, on this show we'll be reviewing Forever, the new series on Amazon. Forever is the story of married couple June and Oscar Hoffman, played by former SNL colleagues Maya Rudolph and Fred Armisen. Alan Yang is the creator of the series. You probably know him as a writer on Parks and Rec or as the co-creator of the Netflix hit Master of None. The first thing I really want to touch on is the opening sequence to the series. I thought it was ingenious. Honestly, one of the best openings to a series I've seen. Period. However, the show has a bit of a fall off from that point. Okay, now I know this is by nature, but the show is kind of dry, depressing, and stale. The show explores the mundanity of life, but that kind of just makes the series a little bit mundane. And I don't think having the word mundane attached to your show is going to have audiences flocking to your series. The show really constricts two legendary character actors in Rudolph and Armisen. They sort of play bland versions of themselves. Armisen's character in Forever is basically a less slapstick version of one of his Portlandia characters. He's like super good at playing a doddering middle-aged man. And in complete honesty, the most interesting character in Forever isn't Maya's or Fred's. I'm really not a fan of the way Yang writes dialogue in Master of None or in this series. It's like he thinks his dialogue is so freaking smart and deep, and somehow that becomes obvious in the dialogue itself. I almost feel like the dialogue in Forever comes across as arrogant at times. Like, look how smart this dialogue is, look how deep it is. It's like, chill out, dude. If you're familiar with Yang's work in Master of None, you know that he likes to take an episode away from the main storyline and follow completely new characters. And he does this again in this series in episode 6. And while episode 6 alone is pretty interesting, it totally lost me. I didn't at all get how it was tied into the main storyline, and it seemed like he was trying to tie it into the main storyline somehow, but I just didn't get it. All this being said, I have to admit the series is actually pretty charming. There are thoughtful turning points sprinkled throughout the series that expose new layers to what at first seems like a pretty typical story. The show focuses on themes of meaning and purpose, but it does a nice job of creating a unique and interesting premise on themes that are so often explored. And while I'm not super impressed with the dialogue, I do think overall the show is really smart. I also really like the series soundtrack. Look, I'm all for cerebral, slow-moving shows and films, but at some point you have to build to a climax. At least in the last episode, and in Forever, that never really happens. I guess we'll be waiting forever. That was a bad joke. Also, there's no big cliffhanger at the end of this season that alludes to a conflict that may take place in season 2. I think there are people that are going to really enjoy this show, and I think there are also going to be people who get bored, turn it off, and forget to finish it. It's really all about personal taste here. I'm such a fan of Maya and Fred that I came in with these really high hopes. And that's often a recipe for disaster when those high hopes aren't met. However, while my high hopes weren't met, they weren't completely destroyed either. Look, some will rate this show higher than I rate it, and some will rate it a lot lower than I rate it. But I'm going to give this show a solid 8. Listen, if you listen to this review and you're like, I like black comedies, I don't care if it's slowly paced, I want to think, then check it out, you might like it. If that's not you, then don't watch the show. Trust me. Alright? Peace. Thanks. Boom.